Welcome back to the class. We are in the midst of discussing a very important book titled The Cracked Mirror, jointly written by Professor Gopal Guru and Professor Sundar Sarukkai. And as you know, Professor Gopal Guru is a professor of political science, and Professor Sundar Sarukkai is a professor of philosophy. And in the previous two classes, in fact 3 classes, we have been having a rather very detailed look into the problematic of this particular book and the major arguments or the major themes that these two scholars have been engaged within this particular book. So we looked at the introduction chapter of this book, and we also looked at the first chapter written by Professor Gopal Guru in the last class, titled Egalitarianism and Social Sciences in India, which, as I mentioned yesterday, is a very stringent critique of the unequal, inegalitarian scenario of Indian social sciences. And he argues, he urges, he exhorts the Dalits to indulge more into theorization because of a host of reasons, because of a host of political and ethical reasons. And as I mentioned yesterday, this article first appeared in Economic and Political Weekly and was later joined by an essay by Sundar Sarukkai, which kind of he responded, or kind of he broadened the debate much more by raising some of the very interesting and fascinating theoretical questions about questions of experience. Who is the owner of an experience? Can the owner of an experience see the author of the experience? Very, very fascinating discussions. We are looking into the next essay, which is titled Experience and Theory, from Habermas to Gopal Guru, written by Sundar Sarukkai. So, so we are again, like the previous two classes, we are going we are going to have a very close reading of this essay. So I did not, I'm not using PowerPoint, rather I'm going by the essay because it's very interesting to read. The previous chapter, Gopal Guru has made some important observations about nature of social science in India. The most important one in my view is about the right to theorize. In Guru's term, the moral stamina that is needed before theorizing is possible. This is an issue that is not limited to Guru's concern about the theoretical exploitation of Dalit. Rather, this is an issue that has occurred in almost all areas of discourses, especially in recent times. So, the most common way of legitimizing this demand of copyright or for a moral right to theorize is by taking recourse to the notion of lived experience, as indeed Guru does. So, basically, Sundar acknowledges that the theme or the problematic that Guru has raised is indeed a very, very valid one. That a particular section of people with a claim to the lived experience say that they have the kind of more authentic view on that, and others are not welcome to participate in that. So such a kind of a moral claim, Sundar will explicate in the next section, is almost prevalent in every field of modern times. And he also brings to the fore a very important concept called as lived experience. Okay, what is an experience and what is the lived experience? Why this lived experience and is intricately connected with notions of freedom. So he's going to elaborate. He's going to broaden the concerns in the coming sections. So who has the right to theorize? In recent times, notions of authority and authenticity have become dominant to the concerns of theorizing. Okay, the notions of authority and authenticity. Authority, when it relates to the question of who has the right to theorize. Who has the right to theorize? Do the men have the right to theorize women's experience? That is one set of question. Who has, and that is most to do with the kind of power relations. And second question is about authenticity. Okay, how do we ensure that the author, the theorist or the scholar is presenting an authentic view of the people whom he is actually studying, he or she is actually studying. So these two are interconnected, but these two are very separate kind of questions. One is who has the right, okay, who has the right, whether should somebody be born into that particular category and only then those have the right to theorize. Secondly, how do we measure the authenticity? Okay, how do we measure the accuracy, authenticity and genuineness of what is being reported, what is being discussed, what is being analyzed. So these are very important connected questions. Guru's arguments that the lived experience of Dalits constitute the only valid and authentic experience, and moreover, that theorizing this experience should be limited only to Dalits is yet another voice in this trend. So he is talking about a host of examples from around the world, including starting from say scholars, artists, painters, and a host of people who have this kind of a opposition in the so-called non-specialist people commenting on their work. Okay, so this is again not something new. This is again something prevalent everywhere. You will find the specialists in a particular field often frown upon anybody else who is commenting on that. Okay, a dancer, we have heard dancers saying that the people who do not know dance cannot criticize that. Okay, so or people who are people would say that non-Westerners should not study, or they cannot make comments or judgments about Indian society. So this whole question of foreigners versus indigenous people, questions of practitioners versus non-practitioners, people who are specialists versus non-specialists. So all these criticisms are all these kind of debates are present in almost every field. And within science, for example, he says there are a lot of scientists who really resent non-scientists commenting on that. And there are a lot of scientists who are very, very angry that sociologists and then philosophers are studying science, the practice of science, and then commenting on that. Especially sociology of science or science and technology studies, it is a well-established discipline that looks into the history and practice and the trajectory of the science. So these scholars make comments which many times are not acceptable to the practicing scientist. So this argument he elaborates in this entire these two paragraphs, that you will find similar kind of arguments in almost every field about outsiders and insiders. So almost everything. This can at times be frustrating, as much as it's frustrating for Guru when he sees non-Dalits taking over Dalit experience. So I'm not going into the detail, but this is essentially the argument. Can an outsider be in a position to make meaningful comments about community she does not belong to, and who really is the outsider? Okay, these are all important questions. Okay, these are important questions. Can an outsider study a particular group? And if not, then who is a real insider? Okay, so what are the qualities that you attribute to a real insider? And again, he talks about the artists have questioned critics of art along the same line. If you are not an artist yourself, then what gives you the competence and the right to talk about art? And then he talks about this very interesting controversy by Sokal and Brickmont, launched a frontal attack on postmodernists for abusing scientific terms. So here he is referring to a very controversial work published by these two people, Alex Sokal and Brickmont, titled "The Intellectual Imposters," first published in French, which really he culled out a lot of passages and sentences and quotes from almost every important postmodernist of our time, Derrida, Lacan, Irigaray, and a host of other people, and then so-called demonstrated that these people did not understand the terms, the scientific terms in its accuracy, and were either completely erroneous, or they were completely ignorant about the actual scientific meanings of that. So he was saying that these postmodernists, he is not saying all, but a particular section of postmodernists are engaging in a kind of a play with the words, trying to complicate, to create complicated sentences and then to mislead the readers. So that book created a lot of controversy. There was huge number of people who supported Sokal and others, and there were also, and each of these thinkers, including Derrida and Lacan, they responded to this criticism, saying that Sokal did not understand the context, or rather understand the language in which these books and works were written. But that was a very, very heavily discussed and debated topic. So this is an issue which he identifies is spread across the place, not only something connected to what Guru says. So what Guru raises is not a isolated incident. It is a very pervasive problem in every field of our modern life. Similar concerns are true of religious communities. Of course, you would have heard that another religious person cannot comment on a particular religion because they simply do not understand it. Okay, so then people in English writing becomes So about English and Indian people. Consider another illustrative example. Indian language writers, especially after Indian English writing became newsworthy, have taken the position that Indian writers who write in English cannot claim to speak for Indian society, since a large number of Indians are not English speakers. Okay, so all these kind of discussions and debates are very much prevalent. Yeah, he says that this. So basically, Sundar does not agree with that argument, because, for example, he gives the example of if you were to write about history, then you should have lived in that particular period, which is impossible. So Sundar has no kind of sympathy for that kind of an argument. Okay, now he invites our attention to another very interesting point. But there's a crucial difference in all these claims of authenticity and Guru's arguments. In many of these cases, the recourse to authenticity and lived experience comes primarily when something unfavorable is written about community or about an experience. This is again a very, very interesting point. For example, if a foreigner writes something so great about Indian society, then we are all happy. We are all happy, we all appreciate that. But when a foreigner writes something negative about Indian society, then many of us tend to question his or her credentials. Similarly, scientists would appreciate a journalist writing something positive about a scientific advancement and a scientific experiment. He would be happy. But if a journalist criticizes a particular practice of science, then they would be kind of embarrassed or unhappy. Okay, but here Guru does not really belong to that particular class. His issue is not about the non-Dalit people saying something bad about Dalit. It is not. Okay, it is not. It is the very act of non-Dalit scholars trying to say anything about Dalits, whether it is positive or negative. So that is a very crucial difference. Now, when an outsider writes that the community perceives as good, the outsider is not only accepted but also valorized. Yeah. Okay. So also in the case with writing Indian culture, so that is that's an important point that we talk, because our position, our approach to the person who is speaking depends upon what the person talks about us. If that person talks about me, which is good, then I appreciate. But if the person is speaking something ill about me, then I will begin to question his or her credentials, and their authority and authenticity will be questioned. At the outset, it may seem that Guru is doing the same thing when he claims that non-Dalits should not theorize about Dalits. That is not really the case. So this is a very crucial point that he is saying. Guru does not take the position that it is impossible for theorists to write about community they do not belong to. Okay, so he is not taking that position that non-Dalits cannot or are not in a position to study, because many people, many sections have that claim. Guru does not have that claim. As he rightly notes, that would involve his inability to theorize about non-Dalits. For Guru, theory has a particular role to play, and that role has to be based on experience and universal reason. Okay, so this is again the point that we discussed yesterday. The theory has a particular role to play, especially for a downtrodden community like this. Theory is quite emancipatory, and this theory has to come from the kind of a lived experience, and it has to be based on experience and universal reason. As he suggests, this route is from the initial to the essential. But what is important is that this is a position that he takes prior to any value attached to what non-Dalits writes about Dalit experience. So it's an argument that he says he's not concerned about what the non-Dalits write about Dalit, whether good or bad. That is not his concern. But his concern is that they cannot do. They cannot do because it's not their inability, but he says that it has an ethical issue involved in it. There is an ethical and political issue involved in it, and that is a point that really fascinates Sundar as well. That is, he is not interested in whether the writing of non-Dalits is complimentary or derogatory about Dalits, but only that non-Dalits have no moral right to theorize about Dalits. And this is something interesting. This is a much stronger view than that discussed earlier and needs a critical analysis to see if it is tenable. The basic difference from the other views is that the former reacts to epistemological claim about something, basically choosing to call somebody as an outsider based on a judgment or what the outsider writes, whereas Gopal Guru's position is ethical and normative and has no place of the theoretical outsider. Okay, as I think it is very clear, the most of the debates that you see around, it is based on an epistemological claim that somebody is an outsider, and because of that their outside position, they are not able to understand our culture, our society, and then study and then present that authentically and originally. That is a claim. But Guru's claim is not that. Guru is not concerned about what the other person, who the other person is, or what the other person is going to write, whether it's good or bad, but he is taking a moral and normative position that outsider must not study Dalits, because Dalits must invest themselves in study and then theorize their experience, because that is more revolutionary. So that is what he is going to explain. Now, coming to the next section, experience and lived experience, the dialectics of choice and necessity. Now he is coming to this question, what exactly is the nature of lived experience? Okay, because this term lived experience is a very often used term in religious studies and in a host of other things. This term comes up quite often. You study the lived experience of women, you study the lived experience of religious people, you study the lived experience of the Dalits. So what exactly is lived experience? And who are the people who can get access to this lived experience? Okay, so that is a very, very crucial question that he brings in. Experience consists of many elements. The subject who experience as well as the structure and content of the experience itself. Okay, a subject experiences the structure of and as well as the content. The impetus to experience may be internal or external to the subject. Having the experience of burning my hand, for example, involves an external event that caused a particular experience in me. But one may also have an entirely internal experience, such as feeling hunger, joy, or angst. So this experience can involve an external agency, but you can also have an experience of, say, mental trauma or a feeling of hunger, which is not infused by an outsider. What does this world lived add to the experience? Experience is often confused with the cause of the experience. This allows us to objectify the notion of experience and transport it everywhere to generate similar experience, leading us to believe that there is a materiality of the whole complex of experience. So this is a very, very important point that he talks about. Many times we attribute experience to a particular external setup, external setting. And we believe that we will, the moment we place ourselves in that particular location, that particular material condition, that kind of a space, we begin to experience that. Okay, so that he says is a very limited understanding of experience. This materiality, seen as the cause, is taken to be independent of the experiencer. Okay, so this outside context, outside atmosphere, outside space is seen as the cause of experience to the person who is experiencing that. Okay, consider this illustrative example. So he gives the example of the experience of eating in a restaurant. Okay, a restaurant whose theme is rural India. So he's giving the example of he's sitting and eating this ragi bowl. Ragi bowl, in other ways, which is called as mudde in Kannada, is a typical native food consumed by people in rural Karnataka. So imagine a restaurant in a modern city like Bangalore, but who has a theme. It's a theme restaurant, and the theme is that of a village. Okay, so when you enter into that, you get a feeling that you are entering into a small house in some interior part of Karnataka, and everybody dress up like that. The utensils are of that kind. The food that is offered is not anything modern, but the kind of food that you see in the rural hinterlands of Karnataka. You go there, you eat that mudde, the ragi bowl, the mudde. Then what is happening to you? Are you really experiencing a rural life, or are you what exactly is happening? Can you call it as an experience? Can you, more importantly, can you call it as a lived experience is what he is questioning. The first point to notice here that a naive view of experience is based on belief that experience can be replicated. Okay, an experience can be replicated endlessly by anybody. That again is a very important folly, very important problem. Not the experience of the subject, but the materiality that constitutes the experience, that which is thought to be disassociated from the total experience. So here he is making a distinction between the subject who experience and the external context in which this experience takes place. So he says that the commonsensical notion or the general understanding always focuses on the external context, okay, without adequately paying attention to the subjectivity, what is happening to this particular person, what kind of changes happening to his subjectivity and experience. Thus, in principle, we usually believe that we can stimulate all and any experience. The possibility of stimulating all and any experience is based on the belief that there is no necessary connection between the experiencer and the experience. Okay. So, in this example of this rural restaurant, rural themed restaurant in Bangalore, it is open to anybody. Okay, anybody can walk in and then feel that experience. Okay? Anybody can walk in and then feel that experience. So there, the subjectivity of the person who walks in hardly matters. He could be from rural India, he could be from urban India, he could be from any gender, any religion, any economic class. But what he goes or she goes and sits and experience is supposedly disconnected from that of the experiencer, because the emphasis is about the material dimension. Yeah. What this view of experience does is to remove the subject as an essential component of experience. All experience is similar to the experience of fun, affairs, and anybody who pays can participate in that experience. So that is what he is a very, very limited understanding of experience. Okay. Now, but can experience really be materialized, commodified, and transferred without taking the subject of experience into account? So his attention, or as a philosopher, he is inviting our attention to the role of this subject, the person who is experiencing it. Okay. Now we can understand the importance of the idea of lived experience. The most useful way to thematize lived experience is to recognize that there is no element of choice or freedom associated with it. Okay. So this is a very important and interesting insight. When you talk about a lived experience, you are talking about a lack of choice. The agent who lives in a particular situation has no choice to come out of it. Okay, a person is mandated to experience that. Okay, he or she has no choice. There is no will to that particular person to simply come out of it. Okay, you are sitting in a restaurant, and if you are not happy with that, you can just walk out. And the moment you walk out, that rural experience ceases to exist. Okay, you are no longer in that particular experience, and then you can get back, you can go to some other hotel, you can get back to the comforts of your house. You are a free agent. Okay, but when it comes to lived experience, you understand a situation where an agent is implicated in a particular situation, and he or she has no choice on that. That is the gravity of a lived experience. It is not based on your whims and fancies. It's not based on your volition. It is based on the fact that you are in a situation, and situation is given to you, and you ought to experience it. Okay, as in the case of a Dalit case, you are born into an untouchable family, and then you are ought to live the life of an untouchable. You can't one day get up and think that, okay, this is enough, let me come out of it and then live like a non-untouchable. That is impossible. So is the case with people born into different gender, different situation, different family situations and other things. So that is a very, very important point that Sundar points out. Now, experience of this kind, often referred to as vicarious experience, always comes with three important characteristics. One, freedom to be a part of an experience. So he's talking about the usual, the non-lived experience, the kind of experience that ordinary people want to have. The case of this restaurant. One, what he calls it as a vicarious experience, that just like buying a commodity, you can experience that. Okay, just like if you want to feel cooler, you can walk into an air-conditioned room and then feel and experience the cold air and then come out. Okay, so there is a one, freedom to be a part of an experience, two, freedom to leave any time if the experience is not satisfactory, and three, to modify the experience if necessary to suit one's needs. So this is not the story of lived experience. Okay, this is the kind of an experience that most of us talk when we talk about. This is one kind of experience that we understand when you say that you experience the pain of somebody. Okay, when something happens to your friend, you feel that you can experience the pain of that. Okay, but here the situation is different. Lived experience exhibit in general none of these three characteristics. Lived experience is not just about living any experience in the sense that we participate in an experience. If lived experience has to play an ethical and epistemological role, if it has to be the adjudicator of some notion of authenticity, then lived experience should be used only for those experiences that are seen as necessary, experiences over which the subject has no choice of whether to experience or not. This is an extremely important point. Okay, even if the experience is unpleasant, there is no choice that allows the subject to leave or even modify it. Okay, and that situation is a major line of demarcation between the people who actually experience it as an insider and an outsider who comes and then experience it for the sake of experiencing it. The experiencer comes to the experience not as a subject who has some control over the experience, but as one who will have to live with that experience. Okay, if you were to look into a woman who is at the receiving end of the patriarchy, as a working as a housewife in a very abusive household, that particular person, if she has no way to come out of it, and if that is a lived reality, then that is the kind of an experience. All this makes lived experience qualitatively different from mere experience. Okay, so that is a very important point that he talks about. What this means is that the structures of lived experience is one that acknowledges the essential unbreakable relation between the subject who experience and the context of and the content of experience. Okay, so I think by now it's clear that the non-lived experience is that you have the whole agency to walk out of the situation, or you can change it. It's something like you can change the temperature in an air conditioned room. Whether if you want to feel more cold or if you want to feel more warm, you can adjust the temperature. Okay, and there you have the volition. Whereas people who are working as a bonded laborers in agricultural field, the kind of heat that they are exposed to, they have no control over that. Okay, this is this unbreakable relation is the relation of necessity and creates the absence of choice. Thus, while experiencing can be duplicated and simulated, lived experience cannot be opened out for experience by any subject. That's a fundamental point. To take Guru's argument seriously, we have to understand lived experience in this matter. For his argument to hold, lived experience should be seen as an experience of being a subject and not an experience by the subject or about a subject. Okay, so while being is different from somebody who wants to become a part of that. Okay, and in the case of Dalit, Guru is very categorical that the Dalit experience is different, because Dalit is born into a person is born into a Dalit family, he lives as a Dalit and then he dies as a Dalit. Okay, an upper caste person who is, even if he or she is so empathetic to the Dalit cause, is not a Dalit. Okay, is not a Dalit, and because of that very fact will not be able to experience the kind of experiences that this person feels. That is, the first prerequisite for an experience to be considered as lived experience is that there is an experience of what it means to be the subject who experience. Okay, this automatically places an element of no choice. There is indeed no choice whether I want to be the subject of experience, although I may have choice about particular aspects of what I experience. You cannot have a Dalit experience unless you are a Dalit yourself, or at least experience what it means to be a Dalit subject with no choice to be otherwise. Okay, a Dalit cannot decide all on a sudden that, okay, it's enough, let me be an upper caste. A woman cannot at any point feel and decide that, okay, it's enough, let me be a man. That is an extremely important point. Thus, participant observation would also not constitute lived experience as long as the observer, who may otherwise live in like a community, has the choice to leave when he is going to get tough or when the observed decided to leave. Suppose we say that to be a Dalit subject is to be oppressed with no choice of escaping this oppression. Then the lived experience of Dalit is not about sharing their lifestyle, living with them and being like them, but being them, in the sense that you cannot be anything else. Lived experience is not about freedom of experience, but about the lack of freedom in an experience. Okay, that's a very precise formulation. Lived experience is not about freedom of experience, it is about the lack of freedom in an experience. Beautifully written. So, Guru goes a step further. He wants lived experience to justify an ethical principle to do theory. So, now after making this point clear, Guru is coming to the central argument of, Sundar is coming to the central argument of Gopal Guru. So, Guru goes a step further. He wants lived experience to justify an ethical principle to do theory. This means that it is not enough to use lived experience as a validation, but it is asked to do more, to become the ground for social theory. Can it live up to what Guru demands for it? Okay, now moving to the another interesting section. Guru's notion of lived experience as an essentially related to theory is only one part of the theoretical elements of an experience. This is the experience of being a subject and not experiencing about the subject, which we discussed. Being a subject is one part of the experience, an essential part, no doubt, but it does not encompass the complete experience. Okay, so if one follows Guru's prescription, then we will have to acknowledge the possibility of expanding what we define as theory and knowledge. If lived experience is to be the final validation of theory, then we will have to look at autobiographies as epistemologically legitimate in a fundamental sense. So, there is some discussion about even including M. N. Srinivas saying that autobiography can be seen as a very valid form of data, because the person has really experienced that. Okay. Now, Sundar is coming to the question of, see, a person encounters lived experience, okay, and he understands this lived experience from his subject position. Okay, of course, he is a lived experience because he or she cannot leave. Okay, there is lack of freedom. But does that person completely understand this particular form of experience? What is the limit of that person's access to that whole experience? Is a very important question. Okay, because the whole question of autobiography comes into picture, because autobiography is a person's own depiction of the reality in front of him, if at all he or she has written it honestly. And we know that autobiographies are quite often dishonest. Okay, there are very few autobiographies that are known for their complete transparency and honesty, and most of the autobiographies are curated and then highly selective in what they want to reveal and what they want to conceal. So, this discussion is about how whether autobiography can be seen as, because autobiography represents what a person experienced. M. N. Srinivas, he believed that autobiography could be a legitimate tool to understand societies. His argument was based on the idea of learning to trust subjective experience and subjective description as being true to the subject who has experienced or who speaks that experience. We can extend this argument further, as I indeed done, to claim that fiction based on lived experience could actually be seen as a legitimate mode of theorizing. Okay, so if autobiography can be seen as a legitimate source of thing, then even fiction based on the lived experience can also be seen as a legitimate resource. But this mode of autobiography or fiction runs counter to the modernist view that depends on the empirical theoretical dichotomy to generate objective knowledge. Okay, now that comes, so whatever I experience is truth and it is reality, or whatever I imagine as fiction based on my experience is reality. This argument runs against the basic principles of objectivity that the modernity wants to make you believe in. Okay, modernity believes that there is a neutral set of criteria, there is a neutral set of procedures, procedures and yardsticks and then qualifications that make certain thing objective. Okay, and uninterrupted or uninfluenced by the subjective dispositions. So that is what the objectivity arguments. For example, this particular pen will have a given length and given weight irrespective of the person who measures it. Okay, so modernity's claim for objectivity, modernity's claim for scientific validity goes against this over dependence over the subjective experience. If Guru wants to hold onto the structure of empirical and theoretical, then he should reconsider emphasis on a lived experience, because lived experience is only part of the story. It does not take into account the whole question of scientific validation and objectivity, because there is there is an internal tension in Guru's argument according to Sundar Sarukkai. Or if he wants to place lived experience at the center, then he should modify his view of theories. Okay, because especially his understanding of the empirical. Okay, because what is empirical and how do you connect empirical to theory is a very, very problematic question. One of the ways in doing this is to demand that ethics be integral to the act of theorizing. If that is allowed, then lived experience becomes the ground for such ethical entertainment with theory. So he is coming to that point. Now, theory and experience, ownership of authorship. So the remaining part of the essay we will discuss in the coming session. I think we are almost half of the essay, and then we will discuss in the coming class. Okay, thank you.